I learned it very early on that a healthy marriage is worth more than its weight in gold. You see, in my profession over the last 30 years, I've seen both sides of this. I've seen people build legacies and empires, and I've also seen it crumble within moments. And so understanding that, I remember I was with my brother, Guy, my big brother. He's the doctor in the family. And we were driving, and he has a really healthy marriage. And, his wife and him, I'm not saying it's perfect, but they get along really well, and they work really well together. And I was like, what's the secret? And he just said, we talk about things until they're not a thing anymore. And then he just moved on to the next subject. And I was like, wait a second, because he just dropped this wisdom on me, and it was so simple, but it was so profound that I wanted to dig into it. And I was thinking, there has to be more to this. But then I thought about what my pops would say to me all the time, that 99% of challenges in business and in relationships, or just in life in general, came down to communication. And then I looked at my mom, what she would say to me, and she would say that if it's a big deal to a woman, that it's a big deal. And she told me that about my marriage before I started. And then I went back to this simplistic wisdom that if you talk about something until it's not a thing anymore, imagine what can happen. And so in Proverbs 28, today, it encourages us to talk with God about everything. And that includes the valuable art of listening also. So why don't we get this party started?
Nothing more on my mind. I got two shines, so every day I grind. Work in the morning, work in the evening. We's achieving, cause we believing. It's for certain, we put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting. Right before your eyes, so it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised. Over and over and over again. Make no mistake, we continue to win. Defeat never known, cause I will not lose. They wanna mimic my moves, but can't walk in my shoes.
Testing 1, 2, testing. I tell you, this talk about it thing was massive. And when my brother told me that, it was such a simplistic kind of thought process of just talk about something until it's not a thing anymore. And what I realized with Proverbs 28 is that God was saying, like, I want you to talk to me about everything. There is nothing too big. There's nothing too small. I just want you to talk to me. And the more and more that you talk to me, then the more and more that you listen and the more and more that you apply, it's amazing what can happen. So it's for me, as we sat down, we sat down in our men's group yesterday, and we talked about this. I thought it was going one way. God had put on my heart about, identify your gifts and then ask yourself, are you using those gifts to the best of your ability? And when I asked that question of our group, what I realized was that some of the guys in our group, they maybe had either identified their gifts, maybe some of them hadn't, but some of them had identified them but weren't using them. And so we encouraged each other in that way. But what opened up in this discussion is I took a little exercise, and we did 20 seconds. And I said, what I want you to do is I'd like you to take and express something that you are not very comfortable with, right? That you're maybe struggling with or whatever it is. And so when we did this, it was unreal, because as I worked through this, I noticed that the guys, at first they were super apprehensive, but with the 20-second timeline, they had to be very direct with their words, use very little words, and they actually, at 20 seconds, all of them wanted to add more to it. So as we jump into Proverbs 28, verse number 1 is doing the right thing creates boldness. Like, if you want to create boldness and courage within your life, what you'll find is that doing right will create these things. And, boldness is, when you walk into that place, and courage is different and confidence is different than, false bravado. And when you want to walk in with courage and boldness, then you'll just simply do the right thing. And how do you know what's right? That was a question yesterday in our men's group also. And the way that you know that something's right is that you spend time talking to God, listening to him, and then he'll tell you what the right thing is to do at that particular time. In verse 2, it talked about discernment and knowledge come from talking about and with God. See, in our men's group, what I found is that we center everything. We want to connect. We want to connect as far as men, all those things. But also, too, what we did is we made sure that we always bring it back to the Word. We always filter it through the eyes of God and through the eyes of wisdom. And we always want to make sure of that, because I tell you, like, our wisdom as men and our experiences pale in comparison to God's experience. So if you want discernment and you want knowledge, then that will come from talking about and talking with God. In verse 3, when you create freedom to talk, you will uplift others. See, we created a space for people for 20 seconds to talk about what they were struggling with, or they were embarrassed about, or whatever it was. And it was amazing how it opened up, and it gave so much freedom to all the people, and it uplifted everybody by the thing that they were the most embarrassed by, or that they were almost kind of starting to hide from, or anything like that. And they just got to share it. The more you talk about something, the less it is a thing. And when you do that over and over again, as much as possible, my brother was telling me, he said, we just talk things to death, and we talk about something until it's not a thing anymore. In verse 4, you can receive instruction when you listen and talk to the right people. And this was a big one, because there's times where I talk to the wrong person about the right thing. I talk to about the wrong thing to the right person. So you want to make sure that you're speaking about the right thing to the right person. How do we know that's the right person? That's just having a conversation with God and connecting with him, and he will direct your steps. He'll direct the steps of a righteous man and woman. That's what he says in his word. In verse 5, knowing what is right comes from talking with God. Like, the only way that we can know exactly what we should be doing at that particular time is going to be when we're in communication with God. That means we're talking to him and we're listening to him also. And in verse 6, right is never wrong. That's a pretty simple one, but it's a profound one to me as I read in verse 6 of Proverbs 28 today. Verse 7, talk, listen, and apply, and wisdom will follow. Talk, listen, and apply. So talk about the things that you're struggling with, listen to wise counsel, apply that in your life, and then wisdom will always follow that. In verse 8 is they know, and God knows. You know why you're doing what you're doing, not just what you're doing. But see, when you align your heart, your mind, and your skills, it creates an irresistible vibe, and people don't even understand why they want to be a part of you. They just want to do it. That creates that irresistible vibe. But see, you know why you're doing it, what's in your heart. Even if your hands are moving a certain way, you know what's in your heart. You know what's in your mind. You know what your belief system is. You know what your intentions are, and you know what your actions are, and you know when they're not in line. So if we lead with our heart as opposed to our actions, that's when we start to create an irresistible vibe as we move forward. Verse 9 is equal parts talking and listening. Now, I always heard that there's 2 ears and 1 mouth. And when we have 2 ears, 1 mouth, listen twice as much as what you talk. But that's honestly, in most cases, it's not a reality. What I would suggest is push for equal parts talking and listening. Speak about something that, my friend Coach Keith, who's going to be at the Vibe Experience, he talks about vulnerability, and that vulnerability is just talking about things that you're embarrassed about or that you wouldn't otherwise talk to. But make sure that you have wise counsel that you're talking to before. And how can we know that? The right person or the right situation comes from being in touch with the person who knows what's right for you, and that's your Creator. So in verse 10, talk about it, seek it, listen to it, and apply it. It sounds oversimplistic in it, but if we talk about things and talk about something until it's not a thing anymore, then we seek it. We seek wisdom in that area. We listen to the wisdom that comes from it, and then we apply it. It's amazing what can happen, right? It's like almost magic. Well, it's not magic. It just that's the pattern on how to be able to do it. In verse 11, silliness is fleshed out with wise counsel. You can have silly thoughts. We can have silly actions. And silliness is just not doing the right thing. And to do the right thing, to know what is right, we just spend time with God and he'll instruct us in those ways. But silliness will be flushed out with wise counsel. And I tell you, talk about it, talk about it, talk about it, talk about it until it's not a thing anymore. And I learned that from my brother. And it was, reiterated from my parents too. In verse 12 is doing the right thing will always be celebrated, not on your time, but on God's time. And that's the cool thing as we move along. In verse 13, nothing is too big to talk about and nothing is too small to talk about. Talk about everything, but make sure that you're talking to the right people about that thing. Verse 14 is God as a cheat code. You can have all the methods in the whole entire world, but when you take it to God, I tell you, it's the biggest cheat code in the whole entire world. And it's free. It's just time. In verse 15 and 16, hang out with great people. I've been very fortunate because I have some of the greatest friends in the entire world. And hanging out with great people is something that, I've been very fortunate. I have a great men's group. I have a phenomenal brother, a great best friend. I have great best friends, since I was a kid. I've got great work associates. I've been very, very fortunate to be around great people. And so great people will give you great counsel. Make sure that you surround yourself with as many great people as you possibly can. In verse 17, it all comes out in the wash, so do the right thing. There's never a time where you're going to be able to hide wrong. It's always going to come out at some point, whether it just come out with you and you feel a certain way or that the rubber's going to hit the road. I could tell you it'll all come out in the wash. So just do the right thing from the beginning and everything will work out. How will we know what's right? How we know what's right is just talking with God, listening to him, and then applying what he tells you to do. In verse 18, it's never the wrong time to do right. In verse 19, work your land. There, you have been given gifts. You have gifts. Identify them, build your life around them, and pour them out to every single other person. I just got on the phone with my friend Dan today, and Dan is an absolute unbelievable human. And what he's always focused on, he's a phenomenal businessman, but he's always focused on where can I go and get wisdom and where can I pour it out onto others? And that's where our whole conversation is what he was talking about. Work your land and it will be plentiful. In verse 20 through 22, faithfulness comes from talking and listening. Talk about the things that are on your heart and listen to wise counsel. Find wise counsel. There's only one place you could get wisdom, and that's from the fear of God. Fear of God is the respect of God. The only way you'll respect something is if you hear their words and see their actions and they're in line. That's how you create respect. And so when that happens, what'll happen is that faithfulness comes from talking and listening. Talk about it and listen to wise counsel, and that faithfulness will produce wonders in your life. In verse 21, love people. This is a pretty simple one. In verse 23, speak life to people. Use their name, what they specifically did great, and how they inspired you. It will change a culture. It'll shift a culture. It'll shift the vibe, and the vibe is not the energy that you bring into the room, but it's just the way that people feel when you leave. And if you want to shift that, then you'll speak life into every single person and environment that you walk into. In verse 24 and 25, trusting in the Lord comes from spending time and communicating with God. Trusting in the Lord, like the only way that you'll trust in something is when you spend time and you communicate. It means it's back and forth. Talk and listen, and then apply. Talk, listen, and apply. In verse 26, your self-talk needs to be filtered with his wisdom. We can have all the self-talk in the world. We can have all the positive things that we want to in the world, but I tell you, always run it through a filter of his wisdom. See, my brother told me, as I told you in the story earlier, he told me that the way that his marriage has strengthened is that they talk about something until it's not a thing anymore. And see, in verse 27, generosity is always good. Be generous with the way that you share with people. Be generous with your time. Be generous with the way that you can allow somebody the space for them to be vulnerable in your area, and make sure that they feel safe in that. In verse 28, the right thing is revealed through talking about it and listening to wisdom. It's amazing when we talk to a wise counsel and we just talk something out. We have an idea, we have something on our heart, a challenge, and we talk about it. It's amazing how it starts to show, like the right thing starts to be revealed as we talk through it. So don't be afraid to talk through it. See, yesterday in our men's group, I told you about it. I put a timer for 20 seconds and I invited all the guys to share something that they were embarrassed about or they were struggling with. But I put a caveat on it. I said, when the timer goes off, you have to stop talking. It doesn't mean it means that if you're in the middle of a sentence and you're just about to lay down a thought, if the timer goes off, you have to stop. And I said this before we started so no one would get emotional. I got them all to say, to agree to this. And then when we started, everyone was kind of apprehensive at first, but I tell you, the first guy went, and when he got done with 20 seconds, he wanted to share more. Second guy, same thing. Third guy, fourth guy. We went through 9 guys, and all of them wanted to express something else that they had. Their 20 seconds was up, but they wanted to do it more when they were apprehensive before. It's incredible because, when you have 20 seconds, you have to be very direct with what you're talking about. And sometimes our thoughts are so jumbled up. And I would suggest, and I would ask you to try this little exercise. See, it was amazing what it did to the group and individually when we talk about things with the right people until they're not things anymore, then magic happens. And so I want to thank my big brother Guy. You're an inspiration. Naomi, you're an inspiration. And both of you, I absolutely love you. I watch you. I see your marriage. You got a healthy marriage. I'm not saying that it's perfect, but I tell you, it is an inspiration to every single person around. And it's incredible to hear that simplistic wisdom of that we talk about something until it's not a thing anymore. And if there's something in your life that you're struggling with right now, seriously, talk about it, but talk to the right people. And who are the right people? You'll know who the right person is when you spend time with the one that created you, because then he'll direct those steps for you. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not to your own understanding. Submit to him in all your ways, and he will make your path straight, and he'll make your path straight to the right people in your life. This has been Inchstones, Proverbs 28. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. We've got the Vibe Experience coming on the 12th of April. That's with Baron Baptiste, unbelievable human being. We've got Coach Keith. We've got James Dixon, the #1 motivational speaker in the world. We've also got Peter Anthony, a marketing genius. And then I get a chance to be there with you too, helping you to align your heart set, your mindset, and your skill set to create an irresistible vibe in all that you do. So check the links in the bio that you can do and get involved with that. If you become a founder on our Substack, you actually get a complimentary ticket to the Vibe Room. So I hope you have a phenomenal day. My name is Kelly Cardenas, and I'm officially off the hot seat. Peace, love, and soul.